I wrote the book in 1966, and the film was made in '73. And here we are 30 years later, and I think it's every bit as powerful, if not more so, than it was when I first did it.
I'm gonna name my last album "The Spook that Sat by the Door." You know what I mean? When I finished my situation with our partnership at Atlantic, and for anybody that ain't seen that book, seen that movie or read the book, it's about a gang member from Chicago who presented himself in a way he never caught no cases. He had a clean cut look, and he infiltrated the CIA.
Yep.
And he became educated and basically he used their agenda, which was to have a token nigga in the CIA for political reasons. You know, we gonna speak blunt, fuck it. He used it against him. And I think that in terms of hip hop, you think of the message that they embrace, I feel parallel with, like, you know what I mean, the power structure. I don't mean the culture of hip hop, but the power structure of music. They got prescribed personas they expect from us. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like the way he used their intention against him was one of my underlying strategies.
I wouldn't give a damn if nobody white ever read my book. If they do, I want them to pay for it and get my royalties. And if they get something out of it, I say, fine. But my audience is not white. I don't write for black bourgeois intellectuals. I write for the people on the block where I live.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me.
The Spook Who Sat by the Door. The controversial best-selling novel now becomes a shocking screen reality. The story of the first black agent in the CIA.
Whoever they select will be the best-known spy since 007.
Their first mistake was letting him in.
And let me congratulate you on being the first Negro officer in the Central Intelligence Agency.
Their worst mistake was letting him out.
You really want to mess with Whitey? I can show you how.
For 5 years, he was their token Negro.
Freeman, you people must serve.
For 5 years, he kept his cool.
Man, you just don't belong. I think you'd be happier with a mop in your hands. Like your mama.
And in return, they taught him how to spy, how to fight, how to kill. For 5 years, he was the spook who sat by the door. And then he turned gangs of ghetto kids into a highly trained guerrilla army.
We live off the land. We match technology with spontaneity and improvisation. Men against machines, brains against computers. Now, if you don't think it can work, you check out Algeria, Kenya, Korea, and Vietnam. Can you dig it?
He turned a summer riot into a revolution.
This is not about hate white folks. It's about loving freedom enough to die or kill for it if necessary.
He turned the American dream into a nightmare. Yesterday, a novel. Today, a movie. The Spook Who Sat by the Door.
And the mayor's office is now air-conditioned, courtesy of the Black Freedom Fighters of Chicago.
I want people to think. And out of thought, concerned action. You don't act first and then think. You think first and then act. That's why we were given brains. That's why we don't act instinctively. And when we do, we're wrong. Whichever way they go, I want them to think about what I've had to say. I'm not trying to recruit anybody. I'm not trying to proselytize. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I want to shake up the mind. I want people to look at that movie and go out of there thinking. And I think I've accomplished that purpose.
Mic check, mic check.
Loud and clear, loud and clear.
All right, y'all know what time it is. We're about to get right into this book. First of all, appreciate everybody that came in. It's in the chat. Appreciate everybody that's going to be listening on the replay. As usual, over here with my brother Reggie Owens. We're about to get it in. And we'll be hitting on chapters 7, 8, and 9, hopefully this evening. So, do I got an echo?
No, wait, try it again. I think it's cleared up. I thought it was me in the background because I had the other one running at first.
All right, let's see. Hopefully not. But nonetheless, go ahead, Reggie. Go ahead and say what you want to say to open up.
Yeah, man. Thank y'all for coming through, man. Here we are in this spectacular book, getting ready for our chapter 7 read, and hopefully y'all enjoy and follow along.
Yes, sir. All right, here we go. Chapter 7. Freeman left the director's office and walked directly to the elevator, nodding briefly at the director's secretary on the way out. He pressed a button, calling the elevator to his floor, and inspected the attached case he had been presented as his going-away present. He was serviceably large and saddle-stitched leather with brass fittings. It contained a few things he had cleared from his desk in the office, which had been his for years in the suite of offices behind the armed guards and door marked simply Director. The elevator arrived and he rode it down, walked across the vast marble hall to the entrance, and waited at the door for the director's limousine. He had known that it would not be awaiting him at the steps, and he showed no surprise, no anger. He had waited many years for what he had to do, and a few minutes more for a car was no problem. It might take him many years to do what he had planned for so long, and an impatient man, he had carefully schooled himself in patience. He stood at the door, looking out into the huge courtyard of the building and out toward the trees that screened the building from the Potomac River, or the Potomac River, toward the city of Washington, hidden by the trees. The courtyard was bright with the Virginia spring sunshine, unveiled by factory fallout. He could not hear the birds behind the big glass doors of the entranceway, but he knew that they would be singing in the trees that lined the river. He had often brought his lunch to eat among the trees there, listening to the birds, watching the slow current of the river, sitting among the pines and sycamore, recalling the smells and sounds of summers spent in a Boy Scout camp in Michigan. A city boy from Chicago, he had never lost his awe and love of the woods, their sights and sounds. The building squatted vast and ugly, a marble and granite conglomeration of the worst and neoclassical and government modern architecture, an ugly abscess created by bulldozers and billions in the midst of the once beautiful North Virginia woods. A cancerous abscess, he thought, sending out its tendrils of infection tens of thousands of miles. He stepped through the door in the sunshine and listened to the sounds of the woods, placing the case at his feet. He was dressed in a quiet bad taste his suit a bit too light, his cuffs a bit too deep, lapels a bit too wide, shoulders a shade too padded, tie too broad, trousers too wide at the knee and ankle, socks too short. He wore large airplane type glasses. His hair was closely cropped, and there was a thin surrounding of gold around a front tooth. His suit was a bit too cheap, and his wristwatch, an 18-karat gold, a bit too expensive. He walked with the gangling shuffle, his head tilted slightly toward one shoulder, and there was always a smile on his face, even when alone in the building in which he worked, broadening and flashing the thin gold when people approached. He was very well liked and would be missed. Waiting for the director's car, he never once glanced back at the building in which he had spent a great part of the last 5 years of his life. The black Cadillac limousine swung into the drive and stopped just ahead of where Freeman stood. The Negro chauffeur made no effort to get out to open the door. Freeman knew that he wouldn't open the door for him and patiently walked to the car, opened the door for himself, and climbed into the air-conditioned interior. The driver started moving before Freeman was even seated, throwing him awkwardly into the car far corner of the rear seat. Smiling gently, Freeman disentangled himself and leaned back into the foam rubber cushions, looking out at the Potomac River as they sped towards Washington through the bulletproof glass. You really going through with it? You really quitting? Yes, said Freeman. And they ain't pushing you out? I thought so at first, but they ain't pushing you out. I didn't think cats like you ever quit a scene like you got. I seen a lot like you in Washington, but I never knew one to quit on his own. Your kind love it here. You don't even quit for money someplace else. It just don't make sense. You really going back to that job you had, like they say? Working with the street gangs in Chicago? Yes, but this time I'll be in charge of the program. I should have known a title, a goddamn title. The only damn thing you cats dig more than money.
Special assistant to the director wasn't enough. Now you're going to be a director yourself. Or did they think up something more fancy? The driver snorted in disgust. Freeman said nothing, and they proceeded along the river road in silence. They moved briefly through Arlington and then onto the drive and past the cemetery. The big statues of the Marines raising the flags on their right. They went across the bridge and past the pompous Lincoln Memorial, the phallic Washington Monument at the end of the reflection pool, and just short of the next bridge, the Jefferson Memorial. The cherry trees were in bloom, a blaze of pink against the green. The blue sky above, with big, fat cumulus clouds floating marshmallow-like against the bright blue sky. They turned right onto Pennsylvania Avenue and drove to the White House, where the guards waved the car into the drive. In front of the White House, the driver again did not bother with the door, and Freeman let himself out and walked into the office annex. He was met at the office door by a pudgy, red-faced man with nervous mannerisms. Dan, how are you? Right on time, right on time. We'll be going in to see the president. And he looked at his watch and then glanced up at the clock on the wall behind the desk of the secretary. exactly 10 minutes. Now we go in. Now we go in between the Boy Scout delegation from East Bengal and just before his monthly tea with some of the congressmen's wives. Split second timing around here, you know, you know how he is if there's a foul up. We have 4 minutes with him and then it's finished. We'll give you a little present. He'll give you a little present. Say a few words, and then you pose for pictures. Should get some play in the Chicago press, which won't do any harm and will send copies to you in Chicago next week. I don't know what his present will be. He's pretty caggy about that kind of thing, but you know what kind of response to give. Little surprise, gratitude, thanks, and tell him how sorry you are to be leaving the team. But I don't have to coach you, Dan. You know what to do. Hey, boy, you know, we're all going to miss you around here. Remember that time he gave you a rebel yell in the Taj Mahal and you smooth things over with the Indian press. We hadn't forgotten that, boy. Around here, not a little bit. You were always in. You were always in there, swinging in the clutch. Yeah, sorry to see you go. Keep in touch now. You hear? Make yourself to home. Oh, make yourself to home. I got to go check on those congressmen's wives. Be right back, and then we'll come. Oh, then we can go in. Freeman sat in a big leather armchair and looked at the big four color portrait of the president on the wooden panel wall behind the secretary. In a few minutes, the red faced man returned. All right, let's go now. We stand outside his office until the Boy Scouts come out. Then we go right in. You know the drill. They waited at the door until the scouts left beaming, each holding a multi-purpose jackknife. They entered the office of the president. The president was seated in his rocking chair. His aide bent over and whispered in his ear as Freeman approached. The president rose and extended a hand, thrusting his own quickly far up towards Freeman's thumbs so that it couldn't be squeezed. A trick learned from countless campaign and handshakes. Well, Freeman, mighty glad to see you again. Sit down, sit down. He had heard Freeman's name incorrectly. He says, Foreman, whoa, Foreman. Mighty glad to see you again. Sit down, sit down. He had heard Freeman's name incorrectly. The aide looked at Freeman in a moment of panic. Freeman ignored his misspoken name, and the aide relaxed in gratitude. Well, now, son, they tell me you're leaving us. Sure, we can't get you to change your mind? The general now tells me he's mighty sorry to see you go. Says you do a good job over there by the river. And the general doesn't hand out praise very easy, you know. Yes, sir, I know. And I'm flattered that he wants me to stay, but I'm afraid I have to leave. I've given it a great deal of thought and conscious cause. You see, I'll be going right back where I grew up to try and use my education to help kids who are like I used to be. Well, Foreman, that's a right fine attitude. But you don't think you might be making a bigger contribution for those very people here in Washington? Offer some inspiration for them to achieve, to emulate you. You know, local boy, make good. That's a point well taken, Mr. President, but I'd rather make my efforts in a more personal way. My small contributions to our great society. Well, now, that time says, well, now, that's good. Very good. We could use you around here, maybe speech writing. I like that. a small contribution to our great society. The president turned to his aide. Put down. Oh, put that down, Smitty. Want to see it in my next speech. He squinted and gazed out into space. As your president, it is my humble pleasure to be able to make a small contribution to our great society. Got that, Smitty?
We could use more of your idealism around here, Foreman. I certainly wish you the best of luck. I spoke to your mayor last week, and they plan to do more in that area. I'm sure he could find room for you in his new commission. Well, Mr. President, I already have a position with a private social welfare agency, one I worked for before I came to the government. Well now, Foreman, never underestimate the good the government does for the people. Even though I am a firm believer in private enterprise, as you know. Yes, sir. I recognize that the great contributions the government has made towards the lives of the individual citizen, and that it is at the head of the war on poverty. But there have to be increased efforts by private agencies and individuals. You're right, of course. We can't have people depending on the government to take care of all their problems. Now, can we? No, sir. I always ask not what my country can do for me, but what I can do for my country. The president's smile tightened. His aside hastily thrust a package into his hand. Foreman, here's a little memento. I'd like to let you have a little token of my appreciation of your efforts in your country's behalf. Freeman opened the package. It was a multi-purpose pocket knife identical to those handed to the East Bengali Boy Scouts. Freeman wondered if the congressmen's wives would find pocket knives useful. He smiled his thanks. You remember the time we were on that tour of the East and all the fuss they made because I gave a little boy rebel I gave a little old rebel yell in the Taj Mahal? Well, you sure handled those Indian newsmen well, but I never could understand why they were so wild. Well, sir, it's a tune, you know. It was a little like someone being disrespectful in the Alamo. Well, now that you put it that way, but I meant no disrespect. Yes, sir. I told him that. His aide gave him a signal, and the president rose and grasped Freeman's hand. Down my way, when you give a man a sharp instrument as a present, you have to give him something in return so that the friendship isn't broken. Yes, sir. Here you are. Freeman slid off his tie, clasped, and gave it to the president. There was a cold silence, the president's grin frozen on his face. His aide hurried Freeman to the door. Recovering, the president called out, "Now, if you get down on my way, you stop in to see me, you hear?" The president frowned down at the tie clasp in his big hand. It was the shape of a PT boat. Freeman walked into the bright spring sunshine, paused on the steps of the White House, and looked out at the traffic on Pennsylvania Avenue. He walked to the side of the building to the parking lot. The chauffeur was leaning against the fender of the shiny black Cadillac, smoking a cigarette. He looked up at Freeman. "Well, big time, the man say you can have the car as long as you want it today. Where you want to go?" "You can go back to the office. I have a bag in the hotel where the airport limousine leaves for National. I'll walk from there. The driver looked at Freeman and flipped the button. It landed just short of the toe of his shoe. Freeman looked at the still smoking cigarette butt, then he looked up at the driver. Nigga, he said, if you had hit me with that butt, it would have been your black ass. The driver stiffened and moved forward from the fender of the car. Come on, said Freeman. You've been wanting some of me for years now. Let's get it on. I'll lay your black ass on the White House steps. You'd like that, wouldn't you? You out of a job, and now you get big and bad in front of the White House. No, I ain't gonna fight you here. You come down to U Street, and I'll kill you. You couldn't kill me on the best day you ever had. Now you can go drive me. Let's go. The driver started around the hood of the car to the driver's seat. Freeman stood at the door and waited, and until he had reached the other side. Nigga, open my door. They stood looking at one another across the lawn. Low top of the car, their elongated reflections amongst almost touching. The driver walked slowly back around the car and opened the door. Freeman got into the back seat. He told him the name of the hotel where he had been staying since the Packers had shipped his effects to his new apartment in Chicago the weekend before. They stopped at the entrance and Freeman passed the check for his bag to the driver. He got out, then returned with the bag without a word. They rode to the National Airport in silence.
When they arrived at the terminal, Freeman got out, handed the driver his plane ticket, parked the car, and checked my bags. Parked the car and checked my bag through. Bring the ticket to me in the bar upstairs. He walked into the terminal and upstairs to the bar and ordered a Carlsberg. He sipped the cold brew until the driver returned. Here's your ticket, big time. One day, I'm going to kill you. Go polish the car, boy. You won't be killing me anytime. The driver stood looking at Freeman's reflection in the mirror to the rear of the bar. Freeman sipping his beer, coolly returns his stare. The driver frowned in curiosity. He had never seen that expression in the 5 years Freeman had been with the agency. Finally, he turned without another word and left the bar. That was stupid, Freeman thought. 5 years, cooling it, and when I blew it, it had to be him. Hell, we could probably be pool shooting buddies, tasting a bit and chasing chicks. But there was no other way. The cover had to be complete, no holes anywhere. It had to be that way, and now he was ready. Or was he? Has his mask become him? He would find out soon now. Had he really put them on, or had he been putting himself on for half a decade? Although trained for it, he had never been allowed to be a functioning agent. But then, that was not why he had been recruited. They had never felt he had either the guts or intelligence to function in the field, and he had reinforced their thoughts on that score. He smiled to himself. He conned them all, and in his own way had been the best of the spooks, and they might never know it. For 5 years, they had been the CIA. For years, he had been the CIA nigger, and his job had been his job had been to sit by the door. And here we are at chapter number 8. Freeman was towards the head of the line, waiting to board the Friday noon flight from New York to Chicago. He had closed his New York apartment. Shipping those things to Chicago, he chose to keep. He had listened to some jazz, attended several plays, and shed his old covers as a snake sheds its skin. He boarded the plane and seated himself, moving with the grace and economy of a fit and well-trained athlete. Gone the insecure shuffle, the protective, subservient smile, the ill-fitting clothes. The new Freeman J. pressed and Brooks buttoned down, seated himself after placing his carry-on bag beneath the seat, fastened his seatbelt, and opened a little magazine with a psychedelic cover to an article urging the legalization of pot. When aloft, he asked the stewardess if he might mix his own martini. He had once ordered a martini on a flight and found that the label proudly claimed a mixture of an 11-to-1 ratio. Freeman, particularly the new Freeman, was a 4-to-1 man. On the rocks with a lemon twist. By the time he had finished his drink and eating the plastic lunch, the plane was beginning to descend to O'Hare Field.
He moved forward to the terminal gate and caught sight of his new boss. Freeman accepted his outthrust hand. Dan, how are you? Welcome back to Chicago. Glad to have you aboard. Thanks, Miss Steffens. It's good to be back. Dan, he smiled with the air of a man bestowed of a gift. Call me Steve. They moved down to the wide tunnel with the crowd toward the huge main hall of the terminal building. Right, Steve, Freeman smiled back. Did you receive the last batch of material I mailed you on the foundation and its works? Yes. I thought the brochure superb. The best PR firm in Chicago did that. My old advertising connections came in handy. That brochure will prove invaluable in fundraising. Never underestimate the power of advertising, I always say. Any baggage to claim, Dan? No, I only brought this bag with me. I shipped everything else ahead of me. It should be in my apartment by now. Fine. There's no need to stop in my office. We'll drop you at your apartment. Now you take as long as you need to settle in. No pressing need to report into the office before late next week. I'll be in Monday morning, Steve. They walked through the automatic doors to the exit and stood waiting at the curb. Mr. Stevens motion to a Ford station wagon across the way. Imprinted on its front doors was the Legion Southside Youth Foundation. I remember you and Perkins worked together years ago when you both worked for the Mayor's Youth Commission. So I had him drive me down to pick you up. The car slid to a smooth stop in front of them, and when they were seated, Freeman leaned over to shake the hand of the slim Negro seated behind the wheel. Perk, what's shaking, baby? Hey, Dan, good to have you back. He moved the car smoothly into the outgoing traffic and south on Dan Ryan Parkway. Dan, said Stevens, withdrawing pipe and tobacco pouch. You have your work cut out for you, but since you're familiar with our operation, it shouldn't It should shorten the breaking period, the breaking in period. Your first job in social welfare was the foundation, wasn't it? Before I took over? Yeah, we worked out of the storefront on 53rd Street. We come a long way since those days, said Stevens proudly. Our new quarters are worth more than $1 million, and we've had several sizable grants since I took charge. How's the contact with the street gangs? As well as could be expected, except for the Cobras. They won't let our street workers near them. They call us Whitey's flunkies, said Perkins. We're hoping, excuse me, we're hoping your appointment might change that image, Dan. Stevens toyed nervously with the Stevens excuse me. Stevens toyed nervously with his unlit pipe. A meaningful contact with the Cobras, and we could get the Ford grant the next day. They were on a real Afro kick for a while, said Perkins. We thought they might have some connection with one of the Afro nationalist groups, but it doesn't seem so. But we can't discount the possibility. It's one of those things we like to know about the Cobras, Dan, said Stevens. They had moved through the whole cut for the expressway through the bowels of the main post office, and now they were moving south again on the outer drive. They're potentially the most dangerous gang in Chicago, said Perkins. The Cobras will be my personal responsibility. I'd like their file to study over the weekend, Steve, if I may. Fine, man. I'll have Perkins deliver it to your apartment later this afternoon. Perk. I want to check out the Cobra Turf tomorrow. Pick me up at my place at 10 o'clock. Saturday night should be a good time. You know the Cobra Turf, don't you? Don't you, Dan? Asked Perks. I ought to. I grew up over there. I was the Cobra warlord when I was a kid. They used to call me Turk. I never knew that, Dan, said Stevens. Yeah, the gang goes on. Street gangs and churches are about the only durable social institutions in the ghetto. You've certainly come a long way since your days as a Cobra, Dan, Stevens said proudly, as if personally responsible. They stopped in front of the pretentious entrance of Freeman's apartment building. I'll see you at first thing Monday morning, Steve. I'll see you right after that. Perk, and I want a meeting with the street workers at 3 in the afternoon.
Good to see you taking charge this way, Dan. How about lunch on Monday? Fine, Steve. See you then. Freeman felt things had gone well, and he anticipated no trouble from Stevens. He entered the building, took the elevator to his floor, entered his new apartment, and began perfecting his new cover. In less than a month, the apartment said everything he wanted about the new Freeman. Counter-levered bookshelves covered the walls of one end of the living room. He drank and served Chivas Regals, Jack Daniels, Black Label, Beefeater's Gin, Remy Martin, Carlsberg, Heineken's, Labatt's, and Ballantines. He had matching AR speakers in a tweed cabinet. Garand, I'm jacking that up. Garand charger with shard cartridge and a Fisher solid state amp with 75 watt per channel. And a Tannenberg stereo tape recorder, a color television set, which could be played through the stereo system, and videotape completed the system. There was a Baccara prayer rug on the plastic parquet floor, wall-to-wall nylon carpeting in the in the bedroom, and wall-to-wall terry cloth in the bathroom. His glasses were of crystal, his beer mug pewtered, his salad bowl Dansk, and his women phony. He he slipped on his cover like a tailor suit, adjusting here, taking in there until it was perfect in every part of him, except a part of his mind which would not be touched, was in was in it and of it. He found that most people did most of the work as far as his cover was concerned. They wanted him to be the white type, uptight Negro of rising aspirations and desperate upward mobility. He chose, he chose his wardrobe with sober, expensive care, opened a number of charge accounts, and slid into barely comfortable debt. He fell into step with others like himself, safe, tame, ambitious Negroes, marking time to a distant drummer, the beat hypnotic, unsyncopated, the smile fixed on their faces, heads held high to pretend the treadmill did not exist and that their frantic motions was progress. More white than whites, devout believers in the American dream because fatigues from the American nightmare, the yawning chasms of ghetto misery at their Brooks Brothers back. They trod its edges warily, their panic hidden behind bright smiles and the sharpened wiles to tell the boss man what he wanted to hear. Freeman attended dull cocktail parties, becoming a bachelor to invite, a prize escort. He was playboy savvy, witty, well dressed, and never drunk or disorderly. He could talk Time Life News. He can talk Time Life, Newsweek, or Sunday New York Times, Manchester Guardian, News Statesman, or Little Magazine, New York Review of Books. He could talk Antony Trufant, Polanski, with Hitchcock, New Wave, football, basketball, track, and boxing. He had a way of making a comment and making it sound as if the listener had said it. He could flirt with the women without angering their men, make the fairies feel at ease, and turn down their propositions without bruising their ego. He ran into Joy in the bar of the Parkway ballroom and made a rendezvous for an afternoon the following week at his apartment. He told himself that he would not be there when she arrived, right up until the time she walked into his apartment. Bronze, lovely, bewigged, and smelling of arpege. I guess I'm saying that right. Arpege. She walked gracefully around the apartment, inspecting it minutely, stroking, feeling, touching, while he mixed their drinks. He handed her drink and smiled cat-like at him, and she smiled cat-like at him, taking a sip. Rob Roy, honey, you never forget anything, do you? It's wonderful to have you back. The grapevine, the grapevine is saying all kinds of things about your new job. They wanted to slide me into the number 2 slot, prop up some white boy, but I wasn't having any. Whatever happened to dedicated Dan? I knew a time when position wouldn't have been as important as making a contribution. You changed, honey. No reason why I can't make a contribution and make some money at the same time. How much is the job worth? I'll be able to live on it. I used to be in the game too, remember? I can make a pretty good guess. The poverty program really inflated salaries. Everybody's getting more money in welfare nowadays. Yeah, everybody but the poor. Next year, the president will be handing out Washington appointments to buy the black vote, and with that much time in your job, you'll be in a good position for one. More money, and in Washington, where the cost of living is lower, she leaned forward for a light, watching him shrewdly over her cigarette. Maybe I shouldn't have been so impatient. I've always knew you change. Like a nice says you like nice things as much as I do. We're really two of a kind, Dan.
You're just more romantic about it than I am, and more idealistic. You always did get your nose open about slogans that save the world. Too late now, baby. You have a husband. After a fashion, his drinking is worse, and he spent all his money on women. If I let him, I don't care how many he has, as long as he's cool with it, and I have enough money to have whatever I want. Latest scene is a white girl on the north side, and from Alabama. Can you tap that? You had him followed? Sure. I don't care what he does as long as I know it. We'll have to have you by sometime soon. Or we'll have to have you by sometime soon. No thanks. You know we never dug one another. Why should you be bugged? You never knew you know he never forgot we had a thing. He'd have a fit if he knew I was here. He listened to her chatter about her apartment, her hired help, her new car and wardrobe, and thought she had come a long way from the girl from the Detroit slums he had known years ago in East Lansing. Her voice was polished, her mannerisms and gestures assured. She wore her expensive clothes with easy grace. She wore an expensive wig and himself and he found himself wondering if she removed it when she made love. Later, he found that she did. In order to confirm the Cobras were the best organization for his plans, Freeman studied them carefully from a distance. He talked casually with anyone in the neighborhood willing to discuss the Cobras. He carefully built personal dossiers of each key gang member, in particular the gang leaders, Dean, Scott, and Davis. He gradually worked out their chain of command and was pleased to find it efficient and effective. The rigid discipline of the gang impressed him more than anything else. Discussion was permitted, even encouraged, but once a decision was made by one of the commanders, that decision stood. For most of the gang members, the Cobras provided the only family they had ever known, offering protection, affection, a sense of belonging, a refuge, and haven from the unremitting hostility of the outside world. Once certain of the Cobras, Freeman made his move. He casually walked into their pool room headquarters not far from South State Street one cool evening. He walked to an empty table in the rear, selected a 16-ounce cue, rolled it on the table to test it for warp, and began running balls. The owner of the pool room walked the length of the room to Freeman's table. Look, mister, he said, I think it might be better for you and for my place if you took one of the other tables. I like this one, said Freeman, without looking up from the table. This table is used by the leaders of the King Cobras. He waited expectantly. Freeman continued to run balls and did not answer. The man sighed and walked away, shaking his head. Freeman hadn't had a pool cue in his hand in years. He had spent much of his adolescence in pool rooms, and it came back quickly. The easy stroke, wrist relaxed, the follow through. English could leave the ball ready for the next shot. When he had run the balls, he tapped the butt of the cue on the floor, and the owner walked to the table and racked the balls. He broke the vari-colored pyramid, studied the table, and began shooting bank. He noticed the sudden silence in the room while studying a difficult shot. Without looking up, he shot. A bank shot twice the length of the table. Before the ball could drop into the left-hand corner pocket, a black hand intercepted it, held it a moment until Freeman looked up, then carefully replaced it on the green table. Freeman looked at them across the length of the table, 3 cobras staring at him silently. He returned the stare. The room was silent, no click and clatter of ivory ball against ivory ball. The chatter and banter of the players gone from the smoky room. They stood silent and dangerous just beyond the light suspended above the table. Freeman chalked his cue, still staring at them, then lined up his next shot. Freeman knew them. Doodaddy Dean, the gang leader, Sugarhead Scott, Secretary Treasurer, and tall and deadly Stud Davis, the warlord at the 19 oldest of the 3. It's our table, the voice came from the shadows, low, soft, and dangerous. I want to talk to you. No talk. Man, move out. No talk for social workers, man. You know who I am? Yeah, we know who you are. Let's step aside. Let's step outside and talk. It won't take long, just a few minutes. You don't want to talk, man. You just want to go home. Better that way. I don't ask no more. Done asked too much already. Freeman motioned to the door in the rear, which opened onto an alleyway. I'll wait for you out there.
He walked out into the darkness and waited, facing the door. They came out silently, spread out to arm's length, and without preliminaries moved in. Freeman moved swiftly, crabwise, in a circle to his left, bringing himself closer to the man on his left and away from the other 2. He stabbed towards his eyes with stiffness, fingers, and when he covered. Freeman gave him a stiff finger jab, elbow and wrist lock. His arms in close to his body, to his opponent's solar plex. When he doubled, Freeman pushed him into the legs of the one in the middle, and in one motion moved to meet Stud Davis. Davis feinted a left and a cross right and a cross. Feinted a left and crossed a right, catching Freeman high on the head. Freeman countered with a left and right, which Davis slipped. Then he kicked Davis hard in the ankle. One of the others was rising, the one he had not hit, and Freeman whirled and gave him a judo chop just below the left ear, dropping him. He turned to Davis and threw with a foot sweep to his good ankle. Foreman moved to the door of the pool room, shut it, returned, and sat on an upended Coke bottle. Oh, and sat on an upended Coke bottle crate. When they stirred, he had them covered with a snub-nosed Smith & Wesson 38 revolver. Don't move. Just sit there and listen. Next time we see you, social worker, we have that too. You ain't going to shoot nobody. Small time, and you sure as hell ain't going to shoot me. Now, you shut up, and I'll pistol whip all the black off your ass. You think you bad? The king ass cobras. Nobody messes with you. You make Molotov cocktails and burn and loot supermarkets. Yeah, I knew. He says, "Yeah, I know what you're doing on the west side, in what you were doing on the west side in July when they had the riots over there. 3 supermarkets, a pawn shop, and 2 furniture stores, and a television store. That color TV in the pool room came from there." They stared at him in sullen silence. The big time cobras, lifting cameras and small time shit from pawn shops, sniping at cops with pistols and 22 revolvers from rooftops. You know how much chance you have of hitting anything with weapons like that from that range at night? What the hell are you trying to prove? He looked at Stud Davis. The fuzz wasted 3 snipers and wounded 8 others. And the only casualty they had was from getting hit by bricks and bottles. You're damn lucky they didn't hit any of the cobras. Okay, you know what? Oh, since you want to hurt Whitey, you want to mess with Mr. Charlie, then stop playing a bunch of punk games. You didn't do any more damage than a mosquito on an elephant's ass. Freeman paused. He had their attention now. You really want to fuck with Whitey? I'll show you now. Chapter 9. Gentlemen, Stevens said in a board meeting in his best advertising executive manner, I have splendid news. He paused dramatically, sweeping the room with his smiling gaze, allowing the suspense to build. Dan has made contact with the Cobras. There was a sudden silence. Stevens paused at this reaction, looked uneasy around the room. He patted his pocket's handkerchief, fingered his pipe, and cleared his throat. Freeman sat quietly. He was not puzzled. Dan, this contact with the Cobras, Stephen had said just prior to the meeting, will really sell the board members on you. Not, he added hastily, that they aren't already. But no one expected a contact with the Cobras so soon after you joined us. This is really good news. Freeman watched their ambivalence fill the room. He watched their ambivalence fill the room like a white velvet fog. White liberals to a man, with the single exceptions of Burkhart, the hard-headed business member. Among them, Roger Thompson, professor of sociology at the University of Chicago, a professional white liberal who had devoted a career to proving that the inequities of Negroes were social and cultural rather than racial. Stevens, an amateur white liberal turned pro.
They can forgive a nigga almost anything other than competence. Saw Freeman behind his mask. They want their choice to have been an act of charity for a Negro not quite up to the job. They want me to fumble, stumble, turn to them for help. They were like the Washington Freeman. He was a good boy. Part of them wants me to vindicate the choice of the spade for the position. But other part wants me to prove once again that it is a spade incompetence, not white racism, which is responsible for the scene. They'll use me, but they'll never like me. This is good news, Steve, said Professor Thompson. But are you certain this is a positive contact? Stephen seemed sensing difficulties threw the ball to Freeman. Dan, Freeman regarded a point midway across the polished mahogany conference table, frowning in thought. Then he leaned forward sincerely and looked deeply into Professor Thompson's contact lenses. Of course, Professor, it is too early to be positive. I advocate caution at this point, and I'm moving slowly. But I made first contact with the gang leaders several weeks ago in their pool room headquarters. I've played pool with them almost nightly, and they've visited my apartment several times since. Visited your apartment? Well, that is a real foot in the door. What are your immediate plans? Standard procedure for a while. Gain their trust and confidence. Offer them an adult male to trust and admire, since they are almost all from broken homes and have none otherwise. He motioned to Stephen's colored secretary, who moved around the table gracefully, placing a folder in front of each member. You'll recognize that concept as your own, Professor. I've taken the liberty of including copies of the article you did concerning it for Atlantic a few years back in these folders. In addition, there are biographic character sketches of the three gang leaders, Dean, Davis, and Scott, plus shorter ones of several other key gang members. There is a table of organization of the gang, including the chain of command and a brief history of the Cobras as a ghetto social institution. My own plans for the gang, subject, of course, to change, are also included. He watched them through the folder. From behind his Grecian mask, a black Prometheus among the gods, who had stolen the secret of fire from Olympus by the Potomac and was teaching its use to his people. Not the fire next time, he thought, but the fire right now. How long before they chained him? To let the black and white vultures tear at his liver. Professor Thompson looked up. I noticed you plan a sports program for the Cobras. Hasn't that approach been pretty much discredited in reaching street corner society? In general, yes, Professor. However, I think it might tend to work with the Cobras. As you know, they emphasize sports far more than usual for a few street gangs. Almost every member is a pretty good athlete, and they still call themselves the Cobras ASC, Athletic and Social Club. And the gang leaders were all star athletes until they dropped out of high school. I thought I might start with a program which appealed to both their combativeness and athletic ability. He paused. I'm seriously considering organizing a judo club. Judo? Exclaimed Buckenhart. Is that just asking for trouble? Isn't that just asking for trouble? Think of what they could do with that knowledge in gang fights. On the contrary, Mr. Buckhart, the judoka has a strict discipline, intrinsic in the training that he will avoid a fight wherever possible. And when offered no choice, restrain himself. Then, striking at Burkhart's soft spot, a fanaticism concerning guns and marksmanship, he continued. It's possible, it's almost identical to the principle employed in weapons training, but gun discipline and a respect for the weapon and its potential. You tend to reduce rather than increase the possibility of its indiscriminate use. Yes, I see what you mean, Freeman. Certainly, I've seen a positive effect of weapons training on antisocial types when I was in the Army. It might work. It might work at that. I actually got the idea from your article in American Rifleman, said Freeman. It was in the August issue, said Burkhart, surprised, pleased, and flattered. You read it? I've made it a point to read everything both you and Professor Thompson have written. It gives me an insight in your approach to the Foundation's work. Burkhart relaxed and smiled at Freeman for the first time in his memory.
Got your nose open now, you little motherfucker. And it would really be beautiful if I could talk you into coaching a rifle team made up of the Cobras, but that can wait. They discussed the Cobras for some time and then adjourn the meeting. Later, over luncheon, Stephen expressed his pleasure. A masterful presentation, Dan. You do well in advertising if you ever left the social welfare game, and I couldn't be more pleased in your finally breaking through with Burkhart. I think we've earned another round of martinis. He motioned to the waitress. In the early stage of his training and organization, Freeman often used the streets for his classes. He would stand casually on the street corner, hanging out and passing along his CIA-bred knowledge. You already said, Turk, it's firepower, not marksmanship, in a firefight. So how come all this jazz about range and wind and that shit? Asked Scott one afternoon. Because everybody has to double up as snipers. Even the cat who can't shoot will have nuance value. Everybody likes to walk around in the dark and not know when somebody is going to shoot at him. Oh, sorry about that. This is nobody. Sorry. Let me start that over. Nobody likes to walk around in the dark and not know when somebody's going to shoot at him. Anyway, like Turk say, ain't nothing to figuring range in the city. The length of a block, distance between lampposts and telephone poles is all standard, said Dean. In an attack, you'll be on battle sites. 300 yards, it will handle anything you're likely to be shooting at. But for sniper work, you try to figure the range to the inch. He paused. To make sure he had their attention. If you were working as a sniper from that corner building and we were the targets, how would you figure the range? He let them puzzle it a minute, then asked their resident mathematician, Sugar. I guess I'd estimate this by sight from up there. NG, no good. Range estimation at night is always tricky, and with artificial light too. He shook his head. Hell, man, it's simple geometry. You know, the height of the building. Yeah, says Scott. Yeah, I know the distance from the base of the building to here. So what's the distance of the third side of the triangle? Smiling broadly, Scott gave the range to the inch. That's all right for him, Turk. But what about the rest of us? Stud Davis asked. Nothing to it. It says nothing to it, Stud. Hips can run Hips can run it down for you in 10 minutes. Man, I never could do anything with math in school. That's because you never had an educational motivation before. It's because you never had educational motivation before. Take over, Sugar, and don't let them go until they know how to do it. Then you each pass it along to the cells. Easy. He walked away. Freeman continued to use the streets for his training, but as the weather grew cooler, he would use the pool room after closing or his own apartment. His close relationship with the gang leaders was completely in keeping with his cover and only added to his prestige as an active, energetic, and imaginative social worker. He gradually gained their confidence. He gradually gained their confidence and growing affection, and the masks they wore for the other side, for the outside world, were loosening for Freeman. Their personality traits becoming increasingly clear. They had been gifted athletes and had delayed dropping out of high school only because of their love of sports. Dean, the smallest one of them, had not played football, but had been that rarest of American Negro athletes, a distant runner. Few Negroes in the United States have had any taste for duplicating in a distance run the exact kind of pain and endurance they face in their daily lives. But Dean ran as he lived, methodically, impassively, and the intensity he hid so well, flashing only at the finish of a race when, head back, teeth bared, he would sprint the last 3 or 400 yards, punishing his black wiry body, and regardless of how far he might be in front or how hopeless his pursuits of a leading opponent. But he seldom lost, except in open meet against older, more experienced men. Ain't but one place in a race, he would say. First place, second and third don't count. He had a sharp, methodical mind and was temperamentally opposed to making hasty decisions. Let me think about it, he would say when a problem arose, and sometimes days later, when others had forgotten, he would present his opinion and it would usually be accepted without question. One night in the pool room after it had closed, Freeman was discussing the table of organization of Cobra Underground. Turk, said Dean, that's the same we always been. That's the same we always been. Right, said Freeman. The only change is here where you had a duplication. He pointed to the blackboard. The organization was already together, and there's no need to change the chain of command or the T and O.
Ordinarily, it would take 3 to 5 years to organize an underground organization of this type from scratch, but the Cobras have always been an underground. How do you mean? Asked Dean. What do you think? Countered Freeman. We discussed the characteristics of an underground revolutionary movement last week. Well, secrecy. Not even all the gang members know how big the Cobras is, and the Fuzz sure as hell don't. We got organization and what's that word you use? Motivation. Yeah, motivation. And we got discipline and we got balls. Right. And there were at least 5 or 6 other gangs who fit that description. Not as well as the Cobras, but well enough for recruit once our training is complete. Got any idea who they might be? Let's see. The Comanches, the Apaches, the Blood Brothers on the west side, said Stud Davis. The Crusaders and the Tigers, said Dean. The Tigers, said Davis. Man, they don't do nothing but give parties. They got chicks in the gang, the Tigerettes. You ever try to crash one of them parties? Asked Dean. Man, them chicks as bad as they are. Right, said Freeman. And we can use women. They can often go places and do things men can't do. There are a couple of other possibilities, but those gangs top the list. How many do you figure if we recruit them all, including the Cobras? More than 500, said Scott. Yeah, and what you think 500 well-trained revolutionaries can do in this town? Turn it inside out, said Davis. They looked at one another, impressed. Shit, Turk, said Dean. You don't play, do you? I sure as hell don't. And not just Chicago, but every city but a ghetto, which is every major city in the North. The members of recruitment and training cell move out in January. Their cities are already selected as well as the first gangs they contact. You're going to turn this country upside down, said Dean. Wrong. We're going to turn this country upside down. You really dig that, Cobras? Don't you? Don't you, Daddy? Freeman asked him one day as they stood in front of the pool room late one lazy afternoon. The people were moving slowly through the streets, standing in clusters, talking softly, occasionally waving to a friend, sometimes detaching themselves from one group to join another. The ghetto sounds, smells, and colors, white teeth and dark faces below the sunglasses which hid them from the cold, hard world, protection for people born to the sun but forced to live in sunless garbage heat of a sad, sunless, sick society. Yeah, the Cobras, the best. Everybody know that. You know, one of the cats moved to New York, and they know our rep way out there. Cat starting to get bad because he knew on the block, you know, to find out if he got any balls. Where you from, nigga? Think you bad? That kind of shit. And he told him he from Chicago, and he a Cobra, and man, he owned the block after that. He the leader of a gang there now. Groovy, said Freeman. Always alert to potential recruits. If they check out, maybe we can use them for our New York scene. Harlem or Bedford Stuyvesant. Harlem? Go on. How you become a Cobra? I never thought I'd be one. You know, I was really little and skinny. Then I wasn't worth shit in sports. I got better all of a sudden. But I was never as good as Stud or Hips or Pretty Willie. Them cats could do anything. I was good.
Oh, you still there? All right, I'm gonna pick up until Tank come back in. All right, so he wasn't as good as Stud. Our hips are pretty willy. Says them cats can do anything. I was good with my hands though. He smiled. You know, if you can't fight it out here in the streets, you sure better be able to run. And I never been too fast. He did not have great straightward speed, but he did possess the quality, says the quality coaches call quickness, great speed of hand, and the ability to change direction instantly. It had made Dean an excellent playmaking basketball guard in spite of his lack of height. I was only about I was only about 10 or 11, and the Cobras used to like to watch me fight. Sometimes they set up a fight with somebody. I had good moves even then. Seemed like I've always knew how to hook. You know, that's a tough thing for a little kid to do. The other punch is easy, but a real good hook ain't easy for a little kid. But I had it. They used to talk. They used to talk about my left hand and make bets and the stuff. Next thing I knew, they make me mascot, and then they start using me to wiggle through windows and things when they hit a store or something, and then I get to be a Cobra. He said it as if it were the most important thing that had ever happened to him. You ever think there might be? Oh, it says you ever think there might not be any Cobras one day? Dean looked surprised, then a bit shocked. What you mean? I mean, we could all get wasted, every one of us. Freeman's gaze swept the street, Freeman gaze swept the street, and he motioned to the people there. I mean, all of us. Nobody knows what Whitey might do when the deal goes down. I never thought about that. Dean looked at the people in the streets with new interest. Does it scare you? Asked Freeman. I don't know. Does it scare you? He looked at Freeman intently. Hell yeah, but that ain't nothing new. I've been scared all my life. There ain't there ain't a nigger living who doesn't know fear. We live in it all our lives, like a fish in water. We just have to learn how to use it. Dean took out a pack of cigarettes and offered Freeman one. In 1 second. And offered Freeman one. He waved his refusal and watched two men across the street deep in an argument. A crowd was gathering, waiting for the explosion. Freeman pointed to them. They're scared. That's why they says that's why they might kill one another in a minute. Watch them. They were serious now, not loud talking anymore. Their voices low and deadly, and already they had dropped. That right foot back and stood aslant. Oh, it says and stood. Oh, aslant. Damn, what's that? Aslant one another in a position for instant combat. They kept their hands ready for attack or defense, each awaiting some move from the other. Damn, they're the deadliest people in the world, thought Freeman. But killing each other all these years instead of the people who put all that fear and anger inside them. Finally, one said something and the other laughed, and they both stood there, their heads flung back, and their dark, oh, it says, and threw their dark laughter into the sky. The crowd joined in, and others threw in jokes and asides. The smile broad in their face, the tension suddenly gone and giving the laughter its force and power. The two men shroud the two men strolled into the bar and the crowd moved on to other diversions. They got a blue. They says they got a blues about that. Laughing to keep from crying. It says, close the door. And that about says it. A few men could get to be a philosopher listening to the blues. If we ever forget how to laugh, we're finished. You really dig spades, don't you, Turk? Yeah, I feel about spades the way you feel about the Cobras. They're my family. I got a family of 25 million people. He smiled. Ain't no way I can ever be lonely. But he was lonely. His cover, his plans had forced him into himself, and his loneliness ate at him like a cancer. Always the iron control, always the iron control, even when drunk. To cover everything himself, nothing, afraid when he cried out in orgasms that he might give something away. Only with the Cobras could he be open. But he knew he used them as well. Sometimes he looked at their faces, trying to etch their features into his memory, knowing that many, if not all of them, would not survive, knowing also that they had no future otherwise. The endless waiting in the lines, the endless waiting in the lines, unemployment lines with Sulin black faces at their end. The white man boss in his office, memorandums on his desk to get tougher, cut down the unemployment rolls, force them out into the streets and into the other lines leading to an employment office where there were jobs only for white faces. Junk jail or junk in jail, and more junk available for those with the price in the county jail. The guards, the safest pushers in the city, they can't bust you in the slam. The junkies joke between heroin knots, an aborted marriage to a favorite fuck, and another black baby with no hope and no future in the land of milk and honey, replete with goodies in white plastic cases for God's own children with white plastic faces. The moves towards, it says they move towards the pool room, walking slowly through the warm streets. That laughter, baby, is the best insurance Whitey has. Once we stop laughing and singing, stop killing each other, and start killing him, forget it. He was amazed at how quickly they learned. He pushed them relentlessly, and each time they reached the saturation point, they swelled to absorb more. He had figure on 18th months and 2 years, but gradually he felt sure they could begin the next summer. He did not allow himself to think of it after so many years of lonely planning that perhaps now he was only says now it was only a matter of months. They reached the pool room and walked inside past the never silent television set. He glanced at the set and watched Ernie Banks wiggle his spikes solidly into the dirt of the batter's box and set his long, lithe body for the pitch. They walked to the table in the rear and began to shoot. Turk, lots of cats, 1A. What happened when they get called? They go underground. You back, my brother? Yeah, I hear you. There we go.
Okay, yes, sir. Appreciate that. Uh, no shit. The Army is our postgraduate course, the best training ground we have. They can teach us skills we need in a fraction of the time that I can. When they get a call, have them check with you. Then we go over what we need and then go and volunteer for the next call. That way, they can pick their training and not get stuck in some unit that's a waste for us. Armor is a waste unless it's armed infantry. You know what we need? Skill with small arms, demolitions, small unit tactics. He paused and smiled. There's a certain poetry in Whitey training us to mess with him. Every black cat in Vietnam is a potential asset for our thing. Whitey knew what he was doing when he wouldn't let us fight in the Second World War. He paused to line up a shot, stroked and missed. He watched Dean as he chalked his cue. You know, American white folks got more nerve than anybody. They call them gooks on. They call them gooks and us niggers out there in Vietnam and in Korea when I was there. And then don't see any reason why the gooks and niggers shouldn't kill one another for Whitey's benefit. The hang up is that it's exactly what's happening. You can't criticize success now, can you? They pretty smart, ain't they? Smiled Dean. Don't know whether they're smart or we're stupid. Maybe a little bit of both. The discipline always good, tightened, and the pride increased. No longer flamboyant, but quieter, cooler. The Cobras walked tall and ready, afraid of nothing. They even lost interest in pot. Tell the cats to turn on every now and then. Get like suburban Boy Scouts and everybody will get suspicious, he told Dean. Then he smiled, remembering pot had become as popular in the suburbs as swallowing goldfish or college panty raids had once been. They drilled endlessly in weapons training, unarmed combat, demolition theory. He taught them the theory of resistance to torture. Most people can't stand up under it, and there's no shame if you can't. But if you give in too quick, they won't believe you and they'll keep it up. You have to hold out long enough to convince them that the info you give them, that you're giving out, is for real. Otherwise, the scene goes on and you haven't gained a thing. What you have to remember is that cats who torture enjoy it. They don't want you to quit too soon. So you have to hold on long enough for them to get their kicks in. Then tell them what they want to hear. Just Whitey all over again. You know when he's putting you down, he don't dig it if you take low too soon. They gradually built up a network of safe house arms, caches, and message drops. Only Freeman knew the entire network. The rest were divided between Dean, Scott, and Davis. He tried to figure a way for training with handguns, then dismissed the idea as one which would attract too much attention. Besides, the kind of fighting he had in mind would find that kind of weapon almost useless. Professor Thompson, who was writing a book on the activities of the Foundation, decided to add a chapter concerning Freeman's work in contacting and diffusing the Cobras. Freeman was becoming known as a bright young man in social work. He was named as an eligible bachelor in Ebony's annual listing, pictured leaning suavely against his lotus. Since he was careful to direct credit towards Stephens, remaining modest and unassuming, refusing to flirt with the white women at the integrated Hyde Park cocktail parties, arriving early and leaving early before the potent cocktails might provoke an unpleasant scene, always appearing with women dark enough not to be mistaken for white. He was pointed out as an example of a Negro who was making it in an American society. No one could imagine that Freeman, tame, smug, and self-satisfied, would ever rock the boat, much less suspect that he planned to sink it. And that concludes chapter 9. We read to you chapter 7, 8, 9 this evening in this great story and book, the novel written by Sam Greenlee called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. All right, man. We about to head over to the barbershop. Man, I'm so into the story. I love the story. And reading it is different from watching the movie. Uh, this is my second time reading it, first time reading it out loud. So it's even more so, it's better, man. I don't know if y'all like reading or watching stuff or listening to music, but it's always better when y'all hear a dope song the second, third time, or watch a movie the second, third, fourth time, and so forth and so on. It's no different with books, man. It's just so exciting to see how the story unfolds when you're not surprised how it's going. But once again, appreciate y'all stopping in. Appreciate y'all kicking in with us. Everybody from DT, Andrew Charles, and everybody else listening to the replay. I know my brother KP from KC stopped in to let us know that he's watching and listening, but he's gonna have to catch us on the replay as well. Everybody else is catching us on the replay. Please tune in tomorrow as we try to tackle chapters 10, 11, and 12. We are halfway through this book as there's only 20 chapters in. And as usual, peace, blessings, and respects to my brother Reggie Owens, who's like my tag team partner as we over here getting it in with this reading. Making reading great again and making it cool to read is the goal. And with that being said, anything you got to say, Reggie, before we head out to the barbershop?
Yeah, man. I was hoping we would have got another chapter until I looked up and see it was like 9:02 around time. Like, God dang. But yeah, this book is unfolding, man. Great read here. Salute to everybody in the building, man. Andrew Charles, salute my brother DT, K from KC. Those in the background tuning in, salute to y'all. And make sure you hit that like button as well.
Yes, sir. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Man, my brother Reggie Owens tagged right on in. I didn't even know my thing got cut out. It's raining over here, so we have bad weather. We having this what they call inclement weather over here. So my brother was a great partner. Just tagged on in and kept the party going until I figured things out on my end. But you know what I'm saying? Like you said, everybody that was listening in that didn't chat, that didn't comment or anything like that, peace, blessing, and respect to y'all too. Catch y'all next time.
Peace.
I wrote the book in 1966, and the film was made in 73. And here we are 30 years later, and I think it's every bit as powerful, if not more so, than it was when I first did it.
I'm gonna name my last album "The Spook That Sat by the Door." You know what I mean? When I finished my situation with our partnership at Atlantic, and for anybody that ain't seen that movie or read the book, it's about a gang member from Chicago who presented himself in a way he never caught no cases. He had a clean cut look, and he infiltrated the CIA.
Yep.
And he became educated and basically he used their agenda, which was to have a token nigga in the CIA for political reasons. We gonna speak blunt, fuck it. He used it against him. And I think that in terms of hip hop, you think of the message that they embrace, I feel parallel with, like, you know what I mean, the power structure. I don't mean the culture of hip hop, but the power structure of music. They got prescribed personas they expect from us. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like the way he used their intention against him was one of my underlying strategies.
I wouldn't give a damn if nobody white ever read my book. If they do, I want them to pay for it and get my royalties. And if they get something out of it, I say, fine. But my audience is not white. I don't write for black bourgeois intellectuals. I write for the people on the block where I live.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me.
The Spook Who Sat by the Door, the controversial best-selling novel, now becomes a shocking screen reality. The story of the first black agent in the CIA.
Whoever they select will be the best-known spy since 007.
Their first mistake was letting him in.
And let me congratulate you on being the first Negro officer in the Central Intelligence Agency.
Their worst mistake was letting him out.
You really want to mess with Whitey? I can show you how.
For 5 years, he was their token Negro.
Freeman, you people must serve.
For 5 years, he kept his cool.
Man, you just don't belong. I think you'd be happier with a mop in your hands.
Like your mama.
And in return, they taught him how to spy, how to fight, how to kill. For 5 years, he was the spook who sat by the door. And then he turned gangs of ghetto kids into a highly trained guerrilla army.
We live off the land. We match technology with spontaneity and improvisation. Men against machines, brains against computers. Now, if you don't think it can work, you check out Algeria, Kenya, Korea, and Iran. Can you dig it?
He turned a summer riot into a revolution.
This is not about hate white folks. It's about loving freedom enough to die or kill for it if necessary.
He turned the American dream into a nightmare. Yesterday, a novel. Today, a movie. The Spook Who Sat by the Door.
In the mayor's office, now air-conditioned, courtesy of the Black Freedom Fighters of Chicago.
I want people to think. And out of thought, concerned action. You don't act first and then think. You think first and then act. That's why we were given brains. That's why we don't act instinctively. And when we do, we're wrong. Whichever way they go, I want them to think about what I've had to say. I'm not trying to recruit anybody. I'm not trying to proselytize. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I want to shake up the mind. I want people to look at that movie and go out of there thinking. And I think I've accomplished that purpose.